All I have to do is say the word frame, and I see artists get a dejected, depressed look in their eyes. Framing has long been the bane of painters, photographers, pastelists, pencil artists, and all others who work in two dimensions. Framing art is time-consuming and expensive, and just when you think you've found the right frame, your clients let you know otherwise. Hi, I'm Jason Horejs, owner of Xanadu Gallery in Scottsdale, Arizona, and this is the Art Marketing Minute. Today, we're going to talk framing. Framing costs impact your bottom line and change the way you price your work. Finding a good framer in your area can prove an exhausting challenge. With all of these hurdles, is it any wonder that many artists are moving away from framing? Many artists who paint in contemporary styles are creating their work on box-stretched, gallery-wrapped canvases that don't need to be framed. I'm also beginning to see artists who are painting in more traditional styles taking this approach. In my gallery, I have very few artists who are using traditional frames. With that said, some artwork begs for a frame. Frames can add real elegance to a piece, and many art buyers with traditional homes simply won't buy work that isn't beautifully framed. I frequently receive requests from artists to share my thoughts on framing, and I'd like to take the opportunity to do so today. I'm also interested in drawing on your collective wisdom in the framing department. So if you have some advice or input on the ins and outs of framing, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Often, a client will see a piece of artwork, fall in love with it, and then say, "But that frame has got to go." Is there anything more discouraging than having to reframe a piece when you put so much time and investment into framing it in the first place? Wouldn't it be great if you could find exactly the right frame every time? Well, the bad news is that you can't. Everyone has different tastes and different needs when it comes to presentation. The perfect frame for one buyer might not work at all for another. With that in mind, I suggest you find frames that you feel do a great job of accentuating your artwork. For some artists, that'll be a simple, minimal frame, and for others, it might be an ornate, gold-leafed one. Employ your artistic eye to find the perfect match for your work, or find a framer who has their own artistic eye, and then have them help you find the right frame. Even though your clients may end up reframing the work down the road, at least if you have a frame you like, you can reuse it on future pieces. I'd also encourage you to aim for consistency in your framing. Not all of your work can be framed in exactly the same way, but if you can keep your framing as consistent as possible, you'll simplify the decision-making process of your framing, and it will become a part of your brand. I've worked with artists who limit their frames to 3 or 4 different moldings, for example. Of course, another major consideration is cost. Frames can run the gamut from $30 to $10,000 and more, depending on the size of the piece and the quality of the frame. Understandably, many artists struggle with making a big investment in a frame. It can be difficult to pay for the framing when you're unsure that the piece will sell. The higher the framing cost, the lower the artist's profit margin when the piece does sell. I've done some research into framing costs, and I found that among well-established artists, those who were selling in the $2,500 to $10,000 range, many are spending 7 to 15% of the retail cost of the artwork to purchase the frame. Now, I hesitate a little bit to give numbers like this because my research is far from scientific. It comes from conversations that I've had over the last several years about framing and pricing. And also because there are so many caveats. As the price of the art goes up, for example, the percent spent on framing can actually go down. Still, I think that pegging framing investment to retail price is a good place to start, and 7 to 15% is probably about the right target. If your prices are low, you're going to be limited in the frame that you can afford. If you're selling a 24 by 30 at $500, for example, your framing budget would be $35 to $75. In framing, you get what you pay for, and you're not going to get much at those prices. Another interesting way to think about framing costs would be to look at it in reverse. Find a frame that you feel is absolutely spectacular, a frame you'd love to buy if money were no issue. Take the cost of that frame, divide it by 15% to find out what your retail price would need to be in order to justify the frame. So if the frame costs $400, you'd get 400 divided by 0.15 equals 2,666. Now, buy the frame, raise your prices to where it would need to be in order to afford the frame, and go out and find a gallery where you can sell the work at that price. Many successful artists consider framing to be an investment, not an expense. What if the frame you've chosen doesn't end up working for your buyers? This happens all the time. You'll still be glad that you invested in a good quality frame. The buyer might simply have passed on the work otherwise. Now you have to figure out the logistics of changing the frame. Here's how we typically handle this issue in the gallery. I'll talk to the artist and find out how much the current frame is worth to them. I then offer that amount to the client as a framing allowance or discount against the retail price of the artwork. The client can then take the art to their own framer, or I will accompany them to our framer if they need some help. I'm an advocate of developing a simple formula for pricing your work. Often artists ask, how do I account for framing costs in my price? When developing the retail price for your work, you need to roll the frame into your formula and make sure that your costs are covered out of your portion of commissions. I've spoken with artists who would like to have a base price that would be used to set the gallery and artist commission, and then add their framing cost on top of that. In other words, if they have a piece they'd like to make $500 on, they would double that to $1,000 in order to cover the gallery commission, then add $150 for the frame. The retail price would be $1,150. When the piece sells, the gallery would keep $500 and send the artist $500 in commission and $150 to cover the frame. Now, I can definitely see the appeal of this scheme, but unfortunately, it's simply not how most galleries' commission structure works. Galleries pay commissions on the total sales price, so your markup needs to include the frame. If you are shooting for a net of $500 and the frame costs $150, your retail would need to be set at $1,300. The only exception I've seen to this is when the gallery has a framing business and they take care of the framing costs and add a markup. The result for the artist would still be the same $500 though. Finding the right framer can be a challenge as well. We have several different framers that we work with and recommend to customers. We worked with custom framers who create their own moldings and do seamless corners, and we work with a framer who uses manufactured moldings. We select the framer based on our client's budget and needs. I would suggest that you look for a framer in your area that has an artistic eye and that offers great service. Get to know the framer you'll be working with. In many ways, the framer will become a partner and advisor in your art business. If you're having a hard time finding a framer, talk to artists in your area and find out who they're using. What do you think about framing? What advice would you give to someone who's struggling with it? What has experience taught you about the framing process? Please share your thoughts below. Thanks for joining me for this Art Marketing Minute. Be sure and check out my blog at red.blog.com if you haven't already. And while you're there, be sure to register for my email list so that I can send you updates and tips to help you build a stronger art business.